All right, so we're going to jump back and forth today between your pencil and your colored pencils, and we're going to use those colored pencils to color code your notes. We're going to get these notes filled in, and then after we have them filled in, I've got a lot of 3D shapes up here that you can visually look at, and I'm going to explain in more detail kind of what I'm talking about with these definitions. So we did 2D geometry before spring break. We're jumping into topic 12, which is 3D geometry. My opinion is that the 3D geometry is harder than the 2D geometry because a lot of the 2D stuff was kind of a review of what you've seen in the past. A lot of this 3D stuff is going to be new, and there's just more steps to it, okay? So we're going to do topic 12 for about 2 weeks here. Towards the end of next week, you'll probably have a summative over this, which means that if you have questions over things as we work through them, you're asking those questions as we go. I do not expect you to walk out the door today with this vocab memorized, okay? But use your resources, okay, and start learning the vocab. That's why we're doing it early. There will be a vocab section on the topic 12 assessment. I will show you today exactly what that looks like. What you actually have for homework tonight is going to be similar to what you'll see on your test, okay? So we are looking at this sheet, and we're going to fill in some definitions here, starting with a face. So if we're talking about 3D geometry, a face is any flat surface shaped like a polygon. So we're going to fill in the word flat there. And then you're going to pick one of your colored pencils. It doesn't matter which one. And I'm going to show you how we're going to kind of color code your notes here. So with that colored pencil you picked up, lightly shade over the word face so you can see I'm using red. Red that I shade on the shapes to the right here is going to represent the face. And if I'm talking about faces, it's all of these flat pieces, all of the kind of 2D shapes that make up a 3D shape. So we're going to shade in, let's shade in this front face here. This is a face of a 3D shape. All right, for this next one, lateral face, we're not going to use a color for this. I'm going to explain this once we get farther down. But a lateral face is similar to a face, but it is a face that joins the bases. So fill that in pencil of a prism. Lateral faces will always be rectangles. So this one probably doesn't make a ton of sense. Once we go through the definition for bases and prisms, that we'll circle back and go over this in more detail. Okay. All right, the next one is an edge. So an edge is the line formed where two faces meet. So you're going to pick a different color for this one. I'm going to do mine in blue. So again, I'm shading lightly that edge word. And the edge, so it's the line where two faces meet. So here are two faces. The line, basically think of drawing a 3D shape. All of the lines that you would draw to draw this 3D shape are our edges. So you can trace over some of those edges in that color. Okay, those are all edges. They're the lines where those two flat pieces come together. Next, we're going to move on to vertex. So a vertex is a point where three or more edges meet. So I also have it on here. Think of it as they're the corners or the points on a 3D shape, so all of the corners. And then I also gave you this word, vertices, is just the plural form of vertex. So if you see the word vertices, it's just asking how many of your, how many vertex do you see? Vertex is singular, vertices is plural. Okay, so pick a different color. I've got purple here. I'm going to shade over that word. And then on this next shape down, I'm going to kind of mark some of our vertices or our corners just with that color there. So we've got some corners there. There's also one tucked in the back of that shape that I didn't mark, but there's another vertex back there. All right, moving on to the base of a prism. So the base of a prism, is defined as one pair of parallel polygonal faces that are the same size and shape. We're going to talk about the difference between a prism and a pyramid here in a second. But a big hint, this thing that's with the asterisks here is a pretty big hint for prisms. If you have any non-rectangular faces on a prism, those are the bases. So that sentence right there. So non-rectangular means any shape that's not a rectangle on a prism, those would be your bases. All right, so I'm going to pick a different color. Pick one you haven't used yet for the base of the prism. And we're going to be looking at this shape right here. Okay. Now, real quick, before we shade in the bases, the two kind of broad categories we're talking about in 3D geometry are prisms and pyramids. Of the two of those, pyramids are something that you're probably more familiar with. You've probably talked about in, like, when you've looked at stuff in social studies about Egypt, the Great Pyramids, right? So a pyramid is always going to come to a point at the top, okay? That's what a pyramid looks like. It comes to a point at the top. Prisms are shapes that don't come to a point, okay? So this shape right here is a prism because it doesn't come to a point at the top, okay? So our bases of this prism would be two pieces that are the exact same size and shape. They're going to be opposite each other and run parallel. And if there are any shapes on this prism that are not rectangles, those are going to be our two bases. So looking at this one, which is the one I'm holding up here, do you see any shapes here that are non-rectangular, not rectangles? Yeah, the two triangles here, do you see how I've got two triangles and they're the same size and shape and they're parallel, they're opposite each other? Those are the bases of that prism. So we're going to shade in these two triangles because they're the two bases. If I were to hold up this prism right here, this is another prism. It doesn't come to a point at the top. Do you see any non-rectangular faces on this prism? What shape do you see that's not a rectangle here? It's a hexagon. It's got 6 sides. So this would be our bases, the hexagons, because they're the two pieces that are not rectangles. Okay? All right, and then the base of a pyramid, so we're moving back to pyramids here. The base of a pyramid is the face that is not attached to the top vertex. So what that means is on a pyramid, it comes to a top vertex or a top point. Whatever face is not attached to that top point, so here's my top point. This is going to be my base because it's the one piece that's not attached to that top vertex. So using your last of your 5 colors, the base of a pyramid, and we're going to go to this bottom shape. If we look here, here is our top vertex. So the one piece that's not attached to it is this piece down here, and that's the one we're going to shade in. Which is, it kind of copied funny, that's a triangle down there. All right, we're going to finish out the rest of this vocab, and then I'm going to go into more detail about these definitions to try to show you a little bit more what I'm talking about. Okay? Bless you. All right, the height of a prism is our next one. The height of a prism is just the distance between the two bases. These ones we're just writing in pencil. We're done with the colors for now. And then the height of a pyramid is the distance from the base straight to the top vertex. It is not going to be the diagonal or the slant. So if I'm looking at a pyramid, the height is not going to be on this diagonal. It's going to go straight to the top vertex, and I'll show you in a second how to see that. Okay, and then at the bottom, I added these couple of prefixes. This was something that last year we had a hard time with, so I just added it to the vocab this year. You do need to know these prefixes and how many sides it means. So if I say penta, like pentagon, how many sides am I talking about? 5. Penta means 5. What about hexa, hexagon? 6. And octa for octagon, 8. Make sure you know those prefixes because we're going to use those when we define what the shape is. Okay? So let's go through and look at these kind of in more detail, and then we're going to start your homework together here, okay? So again, I told you already, we're looking at pyramids and prisms, okay? Pyramids come to a top point, prisms do not, okay? When we go to name a shape, we're going to name it, and it's going to depend on what the base shape is. So let's start with this, the one that we highlighted, the yellow base of the pyramid. This is a pyramid. We said the base is this bottom piece. What shape is the base? Triangle. So we would call this a triangular pyramid, okay? Because it's a pyramid and the base is a triangle, okay? If we jump up to the one above it, though, this is not a pyramid, it's a prism. What shape did we say the bases are here? The two non-rectangular sides. These are also triangular bases. So this is called a triangular prism. So we have a triangular prism, triangle bases but a prism. We have a triangular pyramid, triangle base but a pyramid, okay? I also have here this shape, if I can get it. Pyramid or prism here? Is this a pyramid or a prism? Pyramid. Pyramid, it comes to a top point. What shape is my base on this one? A square. It looks, bless you, like a square. If you're not sure, you can always call it a rectangle. But we would call this a square pyramid or a rectangular pyramid, whatever that base shape is. Okay, so these are both pyramids here, but they have different base shapes, so they've got different names. Okay, these are both prisms, but they've got different base shapes, so they've got different names. Triangular prism, hexagonal prism. So whatever the shape of the base is, that kind of defines what the shape is. Okay, when we're talking about lateral faces, this is one we defined but kind of skipped. So lateral faces are the faces that join the bases. So when we say faces, faces are just all the flat pieces that make it up. So all of these sides are faces. But on a prism, it also has lateral faces, which are just the faces that connect our two bases. So if these are our two bases, these are not lateral faces. The word lateral means side. So our side faces. How many rectangular side faces does this have? 3. So this would have 3 lateral faces. This one, how many side rectangular lateral faces would this have? 6. The base has 6 sides, so it's going to have 6 sides going around it. Those are our lateral faces. Okay, edges we said are the lines. Vertices are the points. We've talked about bases. Okay, height. Height is the last thing that I didn't kind of show you. So the height of a prism is going to be the distance between the two bases. So here, let's go back to this guy. Here is our prism. You have to get out of your head, and some of us got stuck here when we were doing 2D geometry too. Some people hear height and they go, oh, how from the top to the bottom is the height? It doesn't always sit nicely where the height is going to be top to bottom. So the height of a prism, you're going to find your two bases. So right here, the distance between those two bases is considered the height of the prism. So this distance right here would be my height. Okay. Here is our hexagonal prism. These two are my bases. This is my height. I could have it up and down, but I could also lay it on its side, and then the height would be here. So whatever distance between the two bases, that's our height. You with me on that? Yeah. Okay, the height of a pyramid is not the diagonal piece. It is the distance from this top vertex. Picture a line going straight through the center of that pyramid. It's going to form a right angle with the base. So the height goes straight from the bottom, straight up to the top. So it's like you're standing directly in the middle of the pyramid and looking straight up to the tallest point. That's going to be your height. That's different than this diagonal distance. This diagonal here is not the height of the pyramid. Okay? Questions on any of those words? I don't expect you to have them memorized walking out the door, okay? But you are going to need to know these words, and I'm going to show you here in a second on your homework what you're going to need to be able to do on your test, okay? So let's go through. We're actually going to start your homework here in a second. Skip ahead. Okay, so just looking at these, a prism, it says, is a 3D shape that has the same shape for both bases. Who can tell me, if I number these, which of these would be considered prisms? I want to know which ones are prisms. Give me a number that you see that's a prism. Clara? 2. 2 is a prism. Very good. Give me another prism. Logan? 3 is also a prism. Anyone know the name for that prism? It's got all the sides are the same. They're squares. Claire? Cube. It's a cube. Shortcut name for that is a cube. When all the sides, now I could call it a rectangular prism or a square prism because technically it is, but the shortcut name is a cube. Good. MK. 5 is also a prism. Good. I've got a couple more up there, Leo. 7 is a prism. And Avery. 8 is also a prism. Okay. 8 is a rectangular prism. We didn't talk much about this one. This one gets a little bit tricky because people say, well, all of the sides are rectangles, so how do I know which 2 are the base? So think of like a tissue box. All sides are rectangulars. Which ones are the bases? Is it these 2? Is it these 2? Is it these 2? It doesn't matter which 2 you call the base. As long as you say, okay, I'm going to call these 2 the base, then whatever distance between those 2 is going to be your height. So as long as you're making the height the distance between whatever 2 pieces you pick, it doesn't matter. Okay? All right, so I'm going to pass out your homework. We're actually going to start it together so you know exactly what you're going to do, and then you'll have time to kind of get more done on your own. But the whole point of us filling in the vocab notes was so that you could reference them. So don't shut your notebooks yet. And sad news today, I goofed when I made copies. And I gave you the same exact shapes on the front and on the back, just in a different format. So go ahead and cross off the back side. It's the one that doesn't fill up the entire page. You do not need to do the back side. We're only doing the front.
How does that happen?
It like jammed as it pulled it through the feeder.
Well, I copied those.
Yeah, I heard it jam. All right, we're actually going to do 2 of these together, which is only going to leave you with 4 that you have to do on your own. Okay, so you know exactly what I'm looking for. We're going to do this top one together, and then we'll do a pyramid together as well. Okay, so over here, we're looking up here. We're going to name it. The first thing I think to myself, is it a prism or a pyramid? It's a prism. It doesn't come to a top point. What shape would my bases be? Yeah, rectangle. So this is going to be called a rectangular prism. You can only name it a cube if all 6 sides are the exact same and they're squares. So there is a cube on here, but this one is not it. This is a rectangular prism. You could also call a cube a rectangular prism. It's kind of like how all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. It's that concept. Okay, one thing we didn't talk about is the nets. Okay, so a net, does anyone know what a net is when we're talking about 3D shapes?
It's like the shape if it was like flattened out.
Yeah, so picture you're taking your 3D shape, you're going to flatten it and look at it from like a bird's eye view what it looks like. Okay, so if I unfold it essentially, my net is what I got left. Okay, so for a prism, the net is going to be all of your lateral faces just in the middle, so all of these rectangles, and then your 2 bases coming off the sides. For a pyramid, I'll show you that when we get there actually. Okay, so for our rectangular prism net, how many lateral faces would this have? How many faces going around the side? 4. Okay, the base has 4 sides, so it's going to have 4 lateral faces. So I'm going to draw 4 rectangles in the middle. I usually just draw a big one and split it into 4. So those are my lateral faces. And then I want to draw my 2 bases coming off the side. All right, so then jumping to identifying the properties. The question, the number of bases, the answer to that question is always going to be 1 or 2. Pyramids always have 1 base. Prisms always have 2 bases. So how many bases does this one have? 2. We already said the base shape is a rectangle. That's why we called it a rectangular prism. All right, lateral faces. So all of the sides are faces, but how many lateral faces? How many pieces connecting the bases? Yep, so it's these rectangles in the middle are our lateral faces. So there are 4 lateral faces connecting our 2 bases. This is where it gets tricky. People were struggling with these ones. Edges and vertices. Okay, so edges. Think about how many lines would it take to draw 1 base? How many lines? 4. So that's 4 here. How many edges or lines would it take to draw my other base? So 4 more, we're up to 8. And then how many lines does it take to connect my 2 bases? 4 more. So 4, 4, and 4. There are 12 edges total. And then the vertices are our corners. So how many corners are there? I think about how many corners are on this base, how many on this base? 8 altogether. Very good. This is exactly what the vocab portion of your summative is going to look like. I'm going to give you a shape. You're going to have to define it, draw me the net, and then identify the properties. So I'm not going to ask you, like, what is an edge? What is a vertice? I'm not asking you for definitions. But if you don't know what an edge is and you don't know what a lateral face is, you're likely not going to be able to answer those questions well. Okay? All right, let's do one more together. We're going to skip down to the first pyramid. So that's actually the 4th shape we see here. So it's a pyramid. What base shape do we have? This copied kind of funky. Yep, so we're going to call this a triangular pyramid. Triangular. All right, the net of a pyramid nets are kind of cool. The base is going to be in the middle, and then it's just going to have triangles coming off every side of the base. So we've got a triangular base here, and then we're just going to draw triangles coming off of every side of that. These 3D shapes that I've been using to show you things, I'm going to leave out for this whole unit. You're welcome to come up and look at them to count sides and stuff if you need to. Okay. All right, since it's a pyramid, how many bases does it have? One base. So we already said the base shape was a triangle. Not really lateral faces on a pyramid, so this one's just asking how many faces. So how many total sides do you see on this pyramid? 4. We've got 3 around the side and then that one base, which is also a face. So 4 faces. Edges, so how many lines? Think about how many lines it would take to draw this base, and then how many lines going up to the top. So 3 around the base and 3 going to that top point. So there are 6 total edges. And how many vertices or how many corners? Do we agree with 4? There's 3 on the bottom, which is a triangle, right? So 3, and then 1 up top. 3 plus the 1 up top, there are 4 total vertices. Okay. All right, so all you're doing, you've got about 8 minutes left here. You've got 4 other shapes on this page. I would use your notes if you need to look back at definitions and how we color coordinated things. You are welcome to move and work with people. What you don't finish, you'll finish up for homework for tomorrow. All right?